For years, U.S. Army basic training has been a place where young men and women from all walks of life go to be transformed from civilians to soldiers. These brave individuals who volunteer to serve their country are thoroughly screened and tested to ensure they meet the requirements to attend boot camp. One would think that the American government, locked in bloody wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, would implement training doctrines that would better prepare the nation's youth to deal with the harsh realities of war. However, this is not the case. With America engaged in a terrible war, fewer men and women are volunteering for service. In an effort to boost the number of personnel available to serve in combat, the U.S. Army has lowered the standards of basic training and made it easier. Although making U.S. Army basic training easier decreases the high attrition rate of basic training, it will deny new recruits the rigorous training and discipline they will need when called upon to serve in combat. My name is Rosario Torres, and the purpose of my speech today is to inform my audience how the policy to lower the standards of basic training and selection of U.S. soldiers can negatively affect our nation's combat readiness. We will now discuss how these relaxed standards affect our soldiers in combat. A relaxed standard for soldiers in training will bring about a relaxed performance in combat. An article in the San Francisco Chronicle stated, U.S. military deaths from Iraq and Afghanistan now exceed those of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, the most lethal terrorist attacks in America's history. The death toll is increasing at an alarming rate in the war on terrorism. It is bewildering as to why the government would surmise that the key to success in implementing its foreign policy in the Middle East is to mass-produce troops, denying them of the crucial knowledge they will need to survive when their lives are at stake. In an interview, President Bush stated, "There is certainly a stepped-up level of violence. With an increase in unconventional warfare, kidnappings, and sniper attacks, U.S. soldiers deserve the best training they can receive in order to deal with these unfamiliar forms of combat. If the American president is aware of such a grave threat, then focusing on the quantity of bodies rather than the quality of training is unjust to the men and women who have volunteered to put themselves in harm's way." I will now discuss other methods that are being used to boost its numbers. The Army is used to boost its numbers, Lowering the standards of basic training is not the only way the U.S. Army has been filling its ranks. The U.S. Army has also raised the age limit and is allowing some individuals with criminal records to sign up and receive hefty bonuses. The Army has also started accepting an increased number of people without high school diplomas to satisfy its recruiting goals. With all the high-tech components, computer-driven equipment, and sophisticated weapon systems in the military's arsenal, recruiting individuals who could not make it through high school will prove detrimental to the nation's fighting capabilities. If a person could not grasp the concept of high school, it's probably not wise to entrust them with advanced weapons of destruction. The Army cares less about quality and more about quantity. So it's all about one thing: numbers. I will now discuss how lowering the standards proved to be very detrimental in the previous conflict, the Vietnam War. History is beginning to repeat itself. The U.S. government relaxed its military standards during the 1960s and 1970s in order to boost the number of men and women it had available to fight in the harsh, unforgiving jungles of Vietnam. There was no regard for the quality of personnel during the Vietnam War. Young men were simply being pushed through basic training like cars on an assembly line. Men with criminal backgrounds and low scores on the Armed Services Aptitude, Vocational Battery, or ASVAB test were being quickly processed without proper initial screening or training. In his book, Rise and Fall of an American Army, Shelby Stanton briefly discusses Project 100,000, which was basically the same method the Army is using in the present to meet its recruiting goals. According to Stanton, the project was a social experiment designed to shove people of low intelligence into the armed forces. Additionally, Stanton also stated the willingness of many judges to send misfits and criminals into the Army for rehabilitation created severe disciplinary problems. This decline in the quality of soldiers accepted by the U.S. Army led to problems such as fratricide or fragging, and increased drug usage, and desertion, and low morale amongst American troops. Allowing troops into active service who would normally not make it through basic training or the screening process will also lead to an increase in war crimes and acts of violence that are an embarrassment to the United States. I will now give you examples of such an incident that took place in the jungles of Vietnam, the My Lai massacre. The incidents of 1968 in the village of My Lai are a prime example of what can happen when standards are degraded for the sake of filling slots on the battlefield. On March 16, 1968, American troops of the 11th Brigade, Americal Division, 1st Platoon, led by Lieutenant William Calley, massacred 504 innocent Vietnamese civilians. William Calley is an example of what can happen when anyone is allowed to serve in the armed forces. Calley was rushed through officer candidate school, hastily placed in a leadership role in a hostile environment with no combat experience. According to Michael Bilton and Kevin Sims, at the age of 22, Calley was rejected from military service. It wasn't until months later that the Army would lower the standard of enlistees and allow him to enter the military. Under normal circumstances, Calley would have never made it into the armed forces. The military atrocity of My Lai could have possibly been averted if stricter regulations would have been enforced. Today I have given you 3 reasons why lowering the standards, the policy to lower the standards of basic training can be detrimental to our armed forces. Some people will argue that relaxing the standard is a good way of providing soldiers to fight a war on multiple fronts. However, it is not ethical to sacrifice the much-needed training and discipline required for today's soldiers. The combat that new recruits will possibly face is brutal and physically demanding. Tough training and proper screening of potential recruits will help ensure that these young men and women are capable of the rigors of combat and will not take off or run when the bullets start to fly. Basic training and initial processing standards need to be upheld in an effort to keep quality individuals serving in the U.S. military. Opening the door to criminals, vagabonds, and other degenerates can lead to war crimes, desertion, or an increase in the death rate of ill-trained recruits. Fake scores and degradation of basic training are a disaster for the military. Thank you. That's my speech.
Yay! What's up, pup?
Yeah, film yourself.